Dear students, welcome back to this session on the analysis of A Solitary Human Voice by Svetlana Alexievich. A Solitary Human Voice, as we have already seen, is a testimony by Lyudmila Ignatenko, the widow of the firefighter Vasily Ignatenko, who died in the Chernobyl disaster. In the previous session, we were discussing about the situations that happened immediately after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster that occurred on 26th April 1986. We saw how panic was created among the ordinary people at Pripyat because they were unaware of the gravity of the whole situation. They were not even aware of the disastrous consequences of radiation and that they were also being exposed to radiation. Today we will look at Lyudmila's attempts to reach her husband Vasily Ignatenko at the hospital. Through Lyudmila's narration, we understand the larger scene and the condition of other affected workmen and their families. Though we hear only the story of Lyudmila in this particular testimony, we are able to understand the condition of each and every person at Pripyat who were directly or indirectly affected by the nuclear blast. Lyudmila finds that the guards had prevented them from meeting their beloved ones who were injured due to the blast and were admitted in the hospital. Even during that time of commotion, Lyudmila and others were not aware of the real condition in which the men were. The greatest tragedy is when we know that someone very near and dear, someone very close to us, has had an accident and we are not able to see them or know clearly about their condition. Lyudmila and others did not know what had actually happened to their beloved ones. So everyone was in panic. As we will see ahead in the analysis of the testimony, Lyudmila was a very strong woman who loved her husband dearly. We have seen this in the BBC interview as well, as how much she loved Vasily Ignatenko and that she was a very strong woman. So she decided to find a way to meet her husband. A doctor at the hospital was Lyudmila's friend, whom she tries to locate in the crowd. And when Lyudmila finds her, she holds the doctor by her coat and compels her for help to meet Vasily. The doctor refuses to Lyudmila, not because she cannot help her, but because Vasily's condition was very bad. The doctor first says about Vasily and later about all the men. She says, I quote, "I can't. He's bad. They all are." The doctor is very concerned about the condition that these men are in. So she is not in a very happy and a very pleasant situation. It's a commotion unleashed, and she, when finds the disastrous effects of the radiation on the men, the doctor herself is shattered. The line spoken by the doctor tells us about some pathetic condition in which the men are. We are also able to understand the concern in the doctor's voice regarding the men and also her helplessness. The hospital at Pripyat was not prepared for such a disaster. Nobody at the nuclear power plant was also prepared for the disaster. And that is the reason why the blast became very serious and affected many workmen. As we have seen in the previous classes, Vasily and other firemen were called to the nuclear power plant without proper instructions. We have also seen that they had not worn their safety gears. All these taken together, all the people present at the nuclear power plant during the disaster were severely affected by radiation. Though in the testimony, the readers are not made aware of the effects of the disaster till this point of narration. But it is through the words of the guards and that of the doctor that the people at Pripyat and we readers are made aware of the tragedy that lies ahead. After the doctor refuses to help, Lyudmila requests that she just wanted to see Vasily to be sure of his condition. Finally, due to Lyudmila's insistence, the doctor allows her to meet Vasily for around 15 to 20 minutes. That's the time she allows Lyudmila. Now, the moment Lyudmila sees Vasily, both her and we as readers become aware of the monstrous situation. Lyudmila gets the shock of her lifetime. She is very shocked to see that Vasily's body had completely swollen up. Vasily's body was puffed up in certain parts like blisters that are formed due to burns. Lyudmila could not see Vasily's eyes due to the swelling on his face. This description of Vasily is what the doctor meant when she said that the men are in bad shape. The doctor then tells Lyudmila to get some milk for him. The doctor makes a general statement. She says, I quote, "He needs milk, lots of milk. They should drink at least 3 liters each." While Lyudmila's testimony is about her personal loss, through the voice of the doctor, we can very easily understand that the tragedy was a large-scale one that affected the whole population. And the tragedy was mainly because of the ignorance of the people about the disasters of radiation. If you remember, we had discussed this in the previous class. The mention of milk is very important. Do you know why the men have to drink milk? If you remember, we had discussed this in one of our earlier introductory classes. Milk is given as a treatment to people affected with radioactivity. Almost all radioactive elements react and get broken down into lead. And milk is used as a preliminary treatment for removing lead from the body of the affected person. Otherwise, it will destroy the organs. Though it is not a complete solution, giving milk could help in curing, at least on a smaller scale. Here we could see how the doctors and other health workers were trying hard to save the men, or at least reduce the harmful effects of the radiation upon their bodies. The tragedy is highlighted when Lyudmila says that Vasily does not like milk, and the doctor, without any further explanation, says, I quote, "He'll drink it now," unquote. This statement is very important because through the single assertive statement, the doctor makes it clear that the men are in a fatal situation, in a deadly situation. And in order to save their lives and to ease their pain, they would be ready to do anything. The statement by the doctor also makes it clear that there are not much options to save their lives. This single statement communicates the severity and emergency of the situation, as well as the helplessness of the health workers. The next sentence in Lyudmila's testimony is another hint to the trauma and tragedy that the place and the people were about to face. Lyudmila talks about how being near the workmen who were exposed to extreme radioactivity and had become radioactive themselves would later inflict those near them. As we know, Ludmila herself, though unawares, was exposed to the dangers of radioactivity like the doctors and other health workers. Ludmila says that many of those doctors, nurses, and orderlies are people who work as attenders and cleaning staff, etc., all those helpers. So the doctors, nurses, and orderlies, many of these died later due to having been affected by the workmen. Ludmila says, I quote, "But we didn't know that then," unquote. This is a statement that Ludmila has used at an earlier point when she was talking about her love for Vasily. The recurrence of this idea shows the unpredictability of the whole situation. This line also tells us how the normal and ordinary life of some people got permanently and tragically altered due to a man-made disaster. The horror of this sentence is accentuated, it is increased by the next statement of Ludmila in her testimony. Ludmila says, I quote, "At 10, the cameraman Shishanok died. He was the first," unquote. This is the report of the first death due to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. The tone of the sentence seems prophetic. It gives an eerie feel about what lies ahead for the people of Pripyat. He was just the first one to die, so there are many more waiting to be wiped away from the face of the earth. With this statement, Svetlana Alexievich prepares the readers for the remaining testimonies that narrate the horrific experience of people who had to undergo the trauma of a nuclear disaster. The choice of Svetlana Alexievich to place a solitary human voice as the first in the book is to give a proper introduction to the nuclear disaster as well as to mark the trauma and statistics of death. We shall look into the remaining part of the testimony in the next session. Meanwhile, read the testimony again. Thank you.